You're listening to Corny, the last Irishman in the NFL.
The reality of it is that you realize that it's an imperfect game played by imperfect players, coached by imperfect coaches, and the ball's not round. It's oblong, and it doesn't go where it's supposed to go.
Episode 3, third quarter, The Pro.
It was a loose ball and finally covered at the 10.
O'Donoghue tried to kick it.
Oh! O'Donoghue trying to kick the ball, believe it or not.
I don't know what he was thinking, but in a situation like that, fall on the ball.
Watch O'Donoghue. He tried to kick the ball. We thought he was back in soccer for a minute.
Talking about big mistakes, Jim.
What a turn of events.
I get a call from Tampa Bay. Come on down, preseason, they had about 4 or 5 kickers in there. I had a good preseason, got the job there. But everywhere you went was just the Buccaneers, it was, the stadium was packed, they used to call the old sombrero. They had about 68, 70,000 people there. You couldn't get a ticket for nothing, Because nobody really knew Tampa Bay before the Bucs came. When you put a franchise in a town, you know why they paid billions of dollars now. They paid $6-7 million for the Bucs when they bought the team. I think it's probably worth about over $1 billion right now. It puts you on the map, When I first came down, there was very few people. I'd go to beaches, man. The beaches were like no condos, nothing. Beautiful, Now it's kind of like Vegas, But it was just, things come together. Players start believing themselves. It's just confidence.
This is Tig Leader, founder of Leader Kicking.
So if someone wants to be 14-0 as a kicker, that would just mean that if he's attempted 14 kicks, he's 14-0, means he's scored 14, missed 0. So he's 100%, 14-1, he's hit 15 kicks, scored 14. So yeah, obviously the objective is always to be 100% as a kicker. And if a team was 3-7, it's usually that's win to loss ratio, 1-3, loss 7.
You got to understand the Tampa Bay team he went to, right? Tampa Bay was 2-26 when he arrived.
This is Jeff Feinbold.
During those years, he was 55 of 64 on extra points, and it was 24 of 43 on field goal attempts. And he had the ability to go long, right? Which is, if you were, it's different in the NFL. You're more likely to try a long field goal in the NFL than you are in college football or in the Canadian Football League, where the rules are different. And he was a long hitter. He was the guy that you would trot out there to, if you want to muscle one from 50. And, again, I think that's his legacy. I think that's, people will remember him as being a strong-legged guy, a guy that could reach, that you could go anywhere inside of 60, and those were all hittable balls for him.
I got there 78. And they had drafted Doug Williams.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, first-round selection, having acquired the choice in a trade from Houston. Quarterback, Doug Williams of Bramley.
Williams will try to pass on first down. Lets one fly. Long, he's got House open. He's got it. Touchdown, Buccaneers. Kevin House from Doug Williams, and the Bucs have the lead.
He was the first starting black quarterback at the time, if I'm not mistaken. We had Ricky Bell, who was a great running back from USC, and we had some really good wide receivers. Yeah, it was a very young team. We had Leroy Salmon on defense, and we had a couple of really good defensive linemen. So it was really a team. You're in that locker room, we were having a blast, everybody was having a blast.
I was a Bucs fan at that time. I was a big John McKay fan. John McKay, and I would say for the fans out there, go ahead and YouTube John McKay. He was one of the funniest NFL coaches there ever was. Like, he had a line when they were so bad, there was a press conference after the game, and one of the writers asked him, he goes, "Coach McKay, what do you think about your offense's execution?" he had these glasses down over his, and he always had his hat, this golf hat on. And when the guy said, "What do you think about your offense's execution?" He goes, "I'm in favor of it." That's one of the great lines of all time. And, he was that guy. And he needed to be that guy because it took so long for them to get good.
It bothers me that they have picked us to be the worst team in football, because what they're doing now is challenging your physical and your mental capacity and my ability to coach. This hurts me. Second worst team, I could stand it, but not the worst team.
John McKay, to me, was a college coach. He was at UC, very successful, probably one of the most successful college coaches ever at USC. Coaching college kids is a lot different than coaching grown-ups, as I call them.
Why the hell don't you run with the football? He's only got one chance to make his football team. He acts like he's got it made. He ain't got nothing made.
Get out there, you idiot! Oh, horse. No guts, that's what's wrong with us.
Whatever John McKay wanted to say to me was just fine, but he never said it to my face. He never said it to my face. So, you hear it secondhand from somebody, or a newspaper guy would hear it and say it to you, and that's, hey, if he wants to say that, that's his business. He's running the team. That's the way you had to do it, But, I had no real fondness for the guy. Very few people, I think, really like McKay. I think, if you were like Doug Williams, one of the premier players, yeah, he took care of you.
Fans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are experts on the subject of defeat. Together with their team, they were the butt of jokes from coast to coast during their inaugural 26-game losing streak.
We came together after 78 team, because they hadn't won a game in a season and a half, 76, 77. And then they won one game in 77. And then 78, I think we won about 4 or 5 games. So we were starting to get together. Now we're starting to feel we can win a few games,
And then all of a sudden they became the darlings, the dreamsicle darlings, in those great uniforms that they used to wear back in those days, with the Buccaneer on the side of the head and white and orange and kind of a burnt orange color. I mean, they were absolutely gorgeous uniforms. And they had a team full of characters. Ricky Bell, the late Ricky Bell at tailback, and Tony Davis at running back, and the Selmans on defense, and Mark Cotney on defense. I can still name those names as a college kid at that time. And, I can remember O'Donoghue, and he looked like a tight end playing kicker.
Week number 16 of the National Football League. It's a day of ifs. There are so many things that can happen as far as teams still trying to get into the playoffs, but let us centralize ourselves on the Tampa Bay situation.
And then we came out in 79. I think we won the first 6 or 7 games. I think we lost Jimmy DeBose, who was our running back, with Ricky Bell. And that made a big difference. You lose a star. Now we're starting, okay, are we that good? So we finally, I think we went 10-6 that season, but we needed to win 1 game out of the last 4 to get in the playoffs. That was the calculation, I think, at the time. We lost the first 3, and it came out to that game against Kansas City. That one in the rain, tornado, and all of that.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Champion, Dave Kazurek with you. It is a raining afternoon at Tampa Stadium. The Buccaneers kicking off. Neil O'Donoghue. The deep man is Johnny Durden. He comes up for it at the 8-yard line, takes it there to the 10, 15, tries to get outside 20, breaks free, 25, 30, And up near the 35-yard line, Neil O'Donoghue over there to force him down along with Billy Cesar. The rain's going to hamper what could be a championship game, but I think that everybody's going to have to make the best of it.
You know, that's one of the beautiful things about football is, you know, baseball, they rain them out, right? Soccer, you know, you can rain out a game or you can weather out a game, whether it's snow or National Football League games. And the National Football League are like the postman. They always come, whether it's rain or shine. Baby, it don't matter if it's snowing, raining, what it is, you're going to get your football. And that's one of the things I love about football.
I think you're going to see a lot more conservative game from both sides. When it starts to rain, the ball gets a little bit slippery. You've got to go with a little more muscle, a little less finesse. However, Doug Williams has a tendency to throw rather well in rain and wet conditions, and maybe he'll be able to be on target today.
The field was actually covered in water. So it wasn't going to be a high-scoring game because, you know, there were a couple of guys dropping the ball, you know, wet ball and all that, and people sliding around everywhere. I think they missed a couple. And it came down to, I think, the last quarter. And probably one of the few times I spoke with McKay, I figured 3 points was going to win the game, you know, because our defense was holding up. So let me kick it. I said, I got it. And, you know, he's kind of, okay.
The snapper on a field goal can be 7 to 8 yards away, and they snap it back at a rapid speed, so the kicker can then get this kick off in 1.3 seconds. So from the ball being snapped to the ball being kicked, 1.3 seconds is the maximum amount of time you can take. Otherwise, you get blocked. And the reality is, the top snappers say in the NFL, when they rip that snap back, they can do it in such a way, and they're judged on, by the time the holder catches the ball, that the laces on the ball are actually pointing forward. So the holder doesn't have to readjust. He just has to catch it and put the ball down, and the laces are pointing where they should be, because it's quite awkward when the holder catches a snap and the laces are pointing the wrong way to the side or back towards the kicker. You never want the laces looking at the kicker, so you got to twist the ball and spin the laces. Again, this happens in like 0.2 of a second. It's rapid, but it's all happening. You don't get appreciation for it when you're watching it on a wide camera lens on the TV, but it's all going down very quickly, and it's a huge skill set.
I remember the ball being, you know, it was like totally wet, heavy. The snap came back, hit the ground, you know, slid back, and the holder just somehow managed to get it up, you know, and my head was down. There was no way I was going to miss it. I mean, that's, you know, 70,000 people, man. I would have had to left hand quickly, quietly in the middle of the night.
Field goal attempt. Neil O'Donoghue awaiting the snap from Steve Wilson. It is a low snap. The kick is up. Go!
That went through, and that was it. You know, we knew we had it.
Players are really whooping it up on the sidelines. This is what a sight to see. The Buccaneers are the NFC Central Division champions. They deserve it.
So we won that one 3-0. Man, the town was going wild. You know, it was like winning the Super Bowl for us because it's a new team. But we had Philadelphia Eagles the following week, and they were highly touted to win the whole thing, and we beat them pretty handily. And then we went to the NFC Championship game against the Rams. We'd lost our quarterback, Doug Williams, to injury, and we were with a backup quarterback, and we lost that game 9-0. Never really got a chance. Never even tried a field goal or never even scored a touchdown. So that was disappointing. You know, it was we're expecting would have got the Super Bowl, which would have been amazing. You know, for the fourth, fifth-year team.
As a kicker, they're the moments you have to dream of. They're the moments that get you excited. They're the moments that, you know, you spend all the time training by yourself in the off season, or you go through some really challenging times as a kicker. But it's those game winners that excite you. And as I said, again, going back to, we talked about the mentality, the best kickers, I believe that's how they look at those opportunities. to kick a game winner. It's exciting. It's an exciting moment you want. It's an exciting moment you want to take, and you want to go out there and own it.
We honestly thought now, like the 1980 season would have been the one, because we've taken it so far now, we take it to the next level. But then they started making the changes. McKay, who's the head coach, says, okay, we got one of the best young kickers in the league. We're very happy he's going to be around for a while. I said, okay. So I'm still working hard. And then he called me in. He didn't have the balls to tell me. He had one of his, somebody else tell me that to go a different direction. They had a Gary Apremia, who was a kicker at Miami for years, the Miami Dolphins. And he had become available, So he wanted someone with a little bit of more experience. They never went to playoffs after that first year. It had to be about 15 years since then.
He was part of that turnaround. He was part of that team that would go 15-17 over the last 2 years of his career, and that they went to the playoffs.
Now I'm 3 years into career, and you get cut there, so you're kind of thinking, maybe it's time, I was married at this time, and I was actually working on high-rises, doing the metal studs for condos and all that. I still kicking maybe once or twice a week. I'd go try out, and I was okay. I was making decent money, making these metal studs, condos. And we're building condos on the beach in Florida, man. How bad it could it get? And they're getting paid for it too. And the weather, you're up there, it's probably 80, 90 degrees, and you're looking down at the beautiful Gulf of Mexico, and it wasn't bad. And then I was there doing that for about 6 months, and I see my wife down there. She says, you got a call from St. Louis. I said, okay. He says, they want you up there tomorrow. And I said, well, I don't know, okay. So I went down, I told my buddy I'll be gone a few days, hopefully a little longer. Go down, I arrive up in St. Louis, and they pick me up at the airport and take me to the practice over Busch Stadium, which is right downtown St. Louis.
My name is Bob Underwood. I run some Cardinal social media pages. Some people call me a historian. Neil was cut by Tampa Bay before the 1980 season, and the Cardinals had a new head coach in Jim Hanifan, and he was fed up with the incumbent kicker, Steve Little. Steve was a college all-star in Arkansas. He was one of the best kickers in college football history.
Arkansas's All-American kicker Steve Little did battle almost every Saturday afternoon during these fall days, when Lou Holt sent Little on to attempt the longest field goal in Razorback history. The 67-yarder floated through the uprights with plenty of room to spare. With that kick, Steve Little tied the NCAA record for the longest field goal in college history at the time. For efforts such as that, Steve Little ranks among only 2 place kickers who earn a spot on the University of Arkansas's all-century team.
The Cardinals drafted Steve Little with their number 1 draft pick in 1978. And kickers, there are very few kickers who are drafted in the first or second rounds of the draft, and the Cardinals drafted him first. So there was a lot of pressure on Steve Little, and he could never live up to that. He struggled as a kicker, as a punter. In 1980, he got off to a slow start, and after one particular game, Coach Hanifan decided to have Neil O'Donoghue come in. They decided they were going to have a kickoff between Neil and Steve Little.
Practice was going on. The coach came over. He says, listen, after practice, we're going to do maybe different distances. We're going to keep the team out. Pressure's on. Best man gets the job. Okay.
And coach called it a stress test. He wanted to see how O'Donoghue fared under pressure. If he fared well, he could get another job in the NFL. And he wanted to see how Steve Little fared under pressure, knowing that he was probably going to lose his job. They had 16 field goal attempts, and Neil kicked 14 of the 16. He converted, 88%, I think. And Steve Little only made 9 of 16. So the Cardinals released Steve.
He calls me and he says, okay, you've got the job. And as I'm leaving, Steve Little is leaving the same time. And he says, hey, let me show you around tonight and have a few beers. And I said, okay. Irishman, I said, hey, never turned down a beer before. And then I started thinking about it. I says, listen, we're playing up in Washington. I said, I better hold off, you know, so I'll catch up with you. So I said, all right, good luck. I got up that morning at 6 o'clock. I turned TV on. There was his car wrapped around a telegraph post.
It left him paralyzed from the neck down, and he later passed away. I think it was 10 or 15 years ago when he passed away. But it was a tragic situation.
I didn't know what I wanted to keep playing. I really didn't.
It definitely had an effect, and you may or may not know, but the year before, the Cardinals had a player named J.V. Kane, and he passed away during training camp, during practice on the field. So this was the second year in a row where they had tragedies that hit the team. Steve had already been released, but he had a lot of friends on that team, and I know a few of them still today, and they still talk about that. A lot of them blame Coach Hanifan for the way he had them do that kickoff, you know, that contest in practice. I think all the players were there watching, and Hanifan had his reasons. He wanted to see these guys under pressure and what they could do, but it really got to Steve, you know, and some blame Coach Hanifan for that. Personally, I never did.
He knew the players. You know, he'd be in the locker room, he'd shoot in the BS with you and with all the players, and just had a good atmosphere in the locker room. You know, it wasn't a tense atmosphere. Just a good guy, fun guy. You know, after the games on Sunday, he'd be over there. You know, like I say, we were on one of those boats on the Mississippi there. You know, just docked, and we'd have a party after every home game. And he'd be there. He'd come up to you, talk to you. You can go to him, talk to him. So it was a nice relationship. Just a good guy to work for. You know, he didn't make it look like work. And I think he's Irish background, Jim Hanifan. I think he felt a little like my background too. You know, my nickname up there was Irish, and he just one of those guys that just good guy. Make everybody laugh in the locker room. You went out there, you didn't feel the pressure. You know, you did the best you can. You wanted to play for the guy, and you wanted to be successful for him.
I want to tell you one thing. I think too many times in this day and age that I hear guys saying, hey, you got to promote yourself. Bullshit. Just do it. Have pride in it. And I also want to say this. The heart and soul of a football team is the offensive line. With that in mind, then you guys are the heart and soul of the game. Always remember that. Treat it with great respect.
The Cardinals, you know, they moved to St. Louis in 1960, and they had a kicker named Jim Hanifan, and he started in 1962, I believe, and he was the team's kicker all the way up until 1978. And he's a borderline Hall of Fame kicker. I mean, they had one kicker, you know, for 17 seasons, and they brought in Steve, who struggled, you know, over 3 seasons. And there was a lot of pressure on Neil, especially after what happened to Steve. But the rest of that season, he converted on almost 75% of his field goal attempts, which was probably above league average at that time. So if he was under pressure in 1980, he sure didn't show it.
Neil O'Donoghue, a lanky kicker, number 11, who last week came in replacing Steve Little, will kick off for the Cardinals, who were in red, the Colts in white.
I think we should mention, Dick, that the wind is really strong. I would guess 25 to 30 miles an hour. It's swirling, and that's going to have a definite effect on this game.
And we're underway in Baltimore.
1981 and 1982, they improved. And Neil struggled a little bit. He didn't kick as well as he did the rest of that 1980 season. He converted probably around 60% of his kicks, which was below average as far as his peers go. I think the league average is probably around 70% in the early 80s. But he did win a couple of big games against Dallas and in Chicago. And the Chicago win gave them a playoff berth in 1982. And Coach Hanifan always remembered that. And he would always go back to those games that Neil had won with these last-second kicks. Whenever Neil was under pressure, Coach Hanifan would always go back to those 2 games.
He would take me after a miss put his arm around me and say, Neil, you're my man. You're going to be here next week. You're going to do it. No one ever did that to me before.
Midway through the final period, Emery Moorhead's 9-yard catch tied the score at 7. Suddenly, an overtime period loomed ominously on the horizon. Thank heavens for Cardinal kicker Neil O'Donohue. O'Donohue's 48-yard field goal in the game's closing seconds proved to be the margin of victory in a game that was so very close.
I felt like, you're now a veteran on the team. So, you're hanging with, the quarterbacks, running backs. Everybody knows who you are, who they are. So you have a kind of relationship with them. They'd back you. I mean, if they didn't like you, they wouldn't back you. They come up after the game, hang in there, brother. And I always felt like I had their support, and I always felt like pressure on me to produce because of their support. But the older you get at it, the more it doesn't become a job, but you get better at it. You know how to do it. You know how to react to different situations. When you go into stadiums, you know what to expect. If you're going up to Washington, it's going to be a crappy stadium. Back then, at that time, it was grass. I mean, it was all just dirt. Baltimore was dirt on the grass. I mean, you couldn't find a piece of grass. It looked good on TV because they painted it. Now they've got, beautiful surfaces. Most of the games are played indoor. But like I said, you got more comfortable with everybody around you, with the people, with your own press guys, with, the people at St. Louis Cardinals. They all expected me. I was doing stuff in the community. So it was, I felt comfortable.
In 1983, the team was expected to make the playoffs, and they finished around 500. I think they ended up 7 wins and 8 losses. And Neil really struggled. I think he made less than 50% of his field goal attempts, or maybe right around 50. And there was one game in particular in 1983 on a Monday night. They were on national TV, Monday Night Football, against the New York Giants.
It'll be 4th down, and we may have an overtime. All right. Donahue comes out on 4th down. This will be a chip shot from 22 yards.
And Neil kicked the game-tying field goal at the end of regulation to make the score 20-20.
OT, perhaps.
And the game went into sudden death overtime. So whoever scores first in overtime wins the game.
What I can't believe is a lot of fans are leaving. Everybody's getting up, walking out. Don't they understand that we play till somebody wins?
And the Cardinals had 3 opportunities. Neil had 3 opportunities to win the game in overtime.
O'Donohue lives in that world that only kickers know. They don't get that much action. If they kick 4 or 5 a night, they only have about 20 seconds of action. You're really right, because the reaction to the kickers is always extreme. Either everybody's patting them up and down and carrying them off, or they don't talk to them at all.
I think I hit about a 40-yarder.
So here comes O'Donohue, 45 yards. 45-yard attempt. No way. Go left. And the Giants will get the football back, and they'll get it at their own 27-yard line.
Then we had a short field goal, I think it was about 20.
19-yard attempt. Neil O'Donohue.
And it was blocked.
He missed it. I can't believe it.
So the guy came right through, boom, blocked.
O'Donohue has missed from 19 yards. 1:03 remaining in overtime.
So I don't blame myself for that.
And out comes Neil O'Donohue.
The third one, you're kind of like, wow, you're kind of shattered a little bit, but you go out there and just, you try and take it easy.
Oh, he does not miss this one. If he makes it, let's watch him. It's not a 43-yard effort. No. I don't believe what's happening. Poor baby.
It just didn't work out. It was one of those days.
Time is run out in overtime. Go into the Bucs, a 20-20 tie. There could be a drop in attendance for next week's game. And for Neil O'Donohue, sleepless night ahead.
When you miss a key kick and you're the kicker, nobody wants to ride with you on the team bus after the game. Nobody wants to sit next to you on the bench. When you fail, it's a lonely, lonely existence. Now, when you succeed, they carry you off the field on their shoulders. But when you fail, it's tough.
missing 3 field goals as a kicker is you don't really even see it much, especially in the pro ranks, because if you do, you're likely to be fired. Expect there to be 4 kickers flown in to take your job. You're at one end of the pitch getting your reps, but you know two of the four free agent kickers have been flown in and they're here to take your job. So it's really challenging, and the organization say we need the best to win at all times. Obviously, mentally that's tough. We don't really experience that a whole lot in Irish sports. If you don't have processes, you don't have ways to rebound, it can be really challenging and you can sink deeper, and sometimes there's no coming back from that.
I can remember Coach Hanifan, he sent one of the guys home with me to put me on suicide watch. That's how it was. So I got a bit of a hammering in the press about it.
Neil was getting booed. The fans wanted a new kicker. But Coach Hanifan, again, he stuck up for him after the game and went back to those 2 games that he had won in the past. And he predicted that he would win more games in the future.
I would say, and I've never had the pleasure of meeting him, but I would bet he's a mentally tough individual, right? You'd have to be to go through what he went through and continue to go to work every day and compete.
My usual thing is the press. I face them. I never back down when I miss a field goal. They come in, you've had maybe 20 guys around you asking questions. How do you feel? Blah, blah, blah. I wasn't running away from them or anything. I think you have to, man up and just, that's their job and you've got a job to do. But next game was going to be big for me. I think it proved to myself that I can come back. And that's one of the things Hanifan said to me. He says, "You're my guy, man. You're coming back."
Next time on Corny, the last Irishman in the NFL.
Neil O'Donoghue, on whose shoulders it looks like the pressure will ultimately fall, is from Ireland.
Coach Hanifan, or the special teams coach, yells to get out on the field. They're on the field, and just a few seconds later, he's making that kick. So he really had no time to think.
They convinced me to do it, and I said, okay, I'll try it, And it was funny. The day I signed, the league folded.
Corny is produced and edited by Lachlan Hart, with additional recordings by Michael McQuaid of Pro Football Ireland. Like, follow, or subscribe to Corny wherever you get your podcasts.